It's time for Chicagoland Golf with the editor and publisher of Chicagoland Golf magazine, Phil Kosin. The show where for the next 2 hours, you'll get the latest info from the PGA Tour, local tournaments, and tips for your golf game. And now, your host, Phil Kosin on 670 The Score.
Thank you, boys. I try to do my Lawrence Welk impression, but it just doesn't work, Dave.
By the way, Lawrence Welk and I share a birthday.
Larry Welk?
Well, he's not exactly adding on any more years, but...
You share a birthday. Do you guys what? You exchange cards?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine from like the last 10 years, though. I don't know what happened.
Well, yeah, Larry Welk. I remember on that show, they were doing a tribute to the Great War at the beginning of the last century. And he said, and now here's a song. It's a long, long road to Tipperary from World War I.
That's too good.
World War I.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, that polka right there, that's another one that's been freshly written for this show. That is the Bill Murray hit me in the head with a golf ball polka. Well, I want to thank NASCAR Dave for reminding me, because when we were talking back and forth before we went on the air, he had asked me, he reminded me about the Bill Murray incident, and I don't know if you're probably getting ready to go play somewhere this morning. It's going to be 70 degrees today. Wait, where's my bell? Oh, here it is. It's going to be 70 degrees today. Yeah,
just remember that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of golf courses that are worried about who's going to play this year. Are we going to have a good year? People are always going to play golf. There may be a few courses that, if you're not given the service that everybody else, I speak to the golf courses right now, if you're not given the service, the level of service that everybody else is providing, and I don't think I need to tell you that everybody has ramped that up this year, because to have your help hustle a little bit to make the customers really happy. That doesn't cost you anything, and so those courses, I think all courses are going to have better service. The only thing that's going to keep people from playing your course is that you're overpriced for the market, and it's a completely different market this year. So God bless you. I want you all to have a good year, but everybody's on their own, and I'll tell you, it's really getting cutthroat, because there are a lot of private clubs that have got their fishing pole in the pond of public golfers this year, offering things like 1-year memberships. I mean, you might have a chance to become a permanent member, but right now, to get through the lean times, it's no secret that most of the private clubs have lost a lot of members, and they're struggling right now. And this didn't just start lately. It started quite a while back, because, the first sign was when golf courses, private clubs that never, ever had outings or would let anybody from the outside come in and do an outing, a charity outing, fundraiser. All of a sudden, everybody's like advertising, come on over here. We could use the money. And the shame is a lot of those outings were stolen, borrowed, purloined from public golf courses. So that hurt the public golf courses. And of course, it's not the low-end, cheaper outings that are going to the fancy private clubs. It's the ones where they really spend a lot of money. And then the other problem is, Now, all of a sudden, the private clubs that had their gates closed to us public golfers all these years, and it's not all of them, but it's enough. And this is not only happening here, this is happening across the country. I've been talking to people. This is not a local phenomenon. Those gates were always closed to us all these years. All of a sudden now they got financial problems. They're all going, come on in for a 1-year membership. Costs you $1,000. You'll pay a little green fee. You'll pay for your cart. You'll pay for your food and your incidentals and everything. But you can live the life of a private club member. But you know what's going to happen? As soon as they get back on their feet in this recession, don't even get me started on that, but as soon as this thing is over, then they're not going to need you anymore. So be very careful about, I would hate to see public courses. I'm a public course guy. I would hate to see public courses have to close because too many golfers went over and decided to take that private club invitation and come over there for a year or two. If you're a public golfer, you need to spend your money at public golf courses. They really need your help, too, this year. Let's not forget about them. So, now that I've ingratiated myself with everybody, yeah, I said it. I mean, it's too bad if people don't like to hear it. That's what's happening in golf, and that's why people tune into the show to find out those things. And I'm sure there's a lot of people. I'm sure that at places like Harborside and Cog Hill and Silver Lake and Countryside up in Mundelein, I'm sure they're all lined up to get off that first tee this morning. And that's a great thing. The golf courses are very concerned about whether you're going to play a lot this summer. And I don't think, if anything, most serious golfers aren't going to play less. They might move down into a cheaper arena. But if these guys played 50 rounds a year, they're going to still pay 50 rounds. They just may not play 50 rounds at $85 golf courses. So, but Bill Murray, all right, he hooked a tee shot yesterday in Lutz, Florida, so badly during a Pro-Am event, the ball sailed across the street next to the hole, hit a woman in her front yard. She was knocked to the ground and had to go to the hospital. This was at the TPC Tampa Bay during the first round of the Outback Pro-Am. He hit Gail DiMaggio as she was watching the tournament. He was playing with Hal Sutton, Jeff Sluman, and Fred Paglia. They went to the woman's yard in a cart where paramedics were attending to her. Murray's, of course, Bill Murray's always got the right quote, right, Dave? I wasn't sure I was in bounds or not. I saw this NBC golf cart coming at me, and he said, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you hit a lady. She's down on the ground. And then Murray said, that is pretty sobering.
Yeah.
And she was taken to a local hospital. But this is the great part. She was overjoyed when she saw me because she said she had come out to see me, and her husband had just said, well, I sure hope he hits it over here.
Probably not that close. Probably not that close.
Yeah.
And she was on her own yard, too. She lives right along the golf course, apparently, so.
Well, she got popped in the coconut with a golf ball. Okay, we got a great show today. Who knows what's going to happen? During the first hour, we'll talk to our old friend, the national columnist for the Associated Press, Jimmy Litke. He's from Chicago, but he writes in newspapers all over the world. That's pretty cool to have that kind of a forum. During the second half of the show, and we will invite your phone calls toward the end of that second half of the show, we'll have Kevin Weeks, who's one of the top putting instructors, not only in Chicago, but he's got a lot of PGA Tour players, and maybe I can get him to tell some stories. Sometimes the PGA Tour players that go to see him for their putting may have another teacher somewhere else, and so they come in there on the QT. It's all like stealth because they don't want to offend their own teacher that's helping them with the full swing and everything, but they need to have Kevin look at their putting, so they do it kind of sneaky. They come in. You can tell which ones they are. They're the ones walking into Cog Hill with a bag over their head. It's 6:09 in Chicago. I'm Phil Kosin. This is the Chicagoland Golf Show. You're listening to The Score, Sports Radio 670, CBS Radio, Chicago. Masters tournament last weekend. It was number 73 on their list. So, of course, on this show, we've got to bring somebody in that was there. I mean, it only makes sense. And so, let's see, I don't know, Jim, I don't know how I should introduce you. He's not only the national columnist for the Associated Press in the sports department, but he's one of the few guys in a press room like the big one at Augusta National that actually does know Bupkis. You do know what you're talking about, Jim Lipke. Good morning.
Good morning, although at this time of the morning it's pretty hard to know what you're talking when you're talking about anything.
Yeah, there are a lot of different storylines coming out of Augusta. I don't agree with some of them, but I guess let's start out just generally. What was your feeling about this tournament? Give us your thoughts.
Well, you know, I got to tell you, I think Sunday was one of the better Sundays I can remember in a long time because, you know, you in effect had three different tournaments. So we had Tiger and Phil in the undercard, and then you had the Kenny Perry, you know, cruising along to see whether he was as serene as he looked. Turned out he wasn't. And then, you know, the playoff, and all three of them sort of gave you a little bit different storyline. What was nice about the morning part is that it was just insanely good golf. The rest of it was really, you know, it was sort of like they were staging a clinic in how to throw up and who was going to do it the least.
Yeah, that's, you know, we always talk in this business about, well, and the guys were throwing up all over their shoes. Well, if you weren't sure what that meant, you saw it last Sunday. I mean, those guys, I don't think between the three of them there was one eye blink on those playoff holes.
Yeah, the Cabrera shot off the tree was probably my favorite. I got to tell you, for a guy that, you know, got it with the Masters after hitting the ball maybe 20 yards into the trunk of a tree and getting, as we all love, you know, that favorable bounce. I mean, that was a member bounce in every way, shape, or form. And he made a nice putt in order to cash in that par, but nobody played the 18 very conventionally. Perry, who was driving the ball unbelievably all day, really picked up a case of the lefts, starting on 17 in regulation, never really lost it all the way down to that iron shot that basically lost him the Masters on the second playoff hole. So, you know, out of the three, basically you figure they played three playoff holes. Cabrera hit one really good shot, which was the iron into number 10, excuse me. And then, you know, had a two-putt because Perry didn't have a chance to make it anyway. So, well, you know, the ending was not glorious, but if you'd seen everything that went into it up to that point, it was pretty entertaining. I got to, you know, it had a little bit of everything, not quite the you know, crazy freak shot quality when Tiger chipped in on 16 a couple of years ago when the ball dangled on the lip of the hole, but it had plenty of, you know, of excitement in the morning. I walked out with Mickelson and Woods, and I got to tell you, I saw maybe the greatest golf shot I've ever seen live at number 7. When Mickelson was basically pinned in between the gallery ropes and some trees, and there's about a 3-foot box at the front of that green. It's a little mound. They always put the flag behind a bunker on either side of that thing, and there's maybe 3 feet of turf to land it on. He brought it from 200 yards under the trees up in the air, bounced it right at the front of the mound, killed all the, you know, velocity on the shot, trickled over the hill and rolled about 6 inches. I mean, it was unreal where this guy came up with that shot.
You know, we know where the tough holes are at Augusta National, and if you ask me to list my top 4 tough holes, I'm not listing 17 and 18. So is it that those holes were set up tough? Have they become toughened over the years with changes? Or is it just pure nerves that makes it difficult to play those holes?
The last two that you basically mentioned, both of them have been toughened a little bit. 17 has been always had the craziest green I think I've ever seen. I mean, that thing is, you can't really appreciate it on TV. It's crowned at both ends, and the point is if you get yourself on either side of that, holding the ball on the green is, you know, next to impossible. You can hold it coming into the green, if, you know, from reasonable iron distance, but if you're playing anything off to the side either way, you know, that thing's got to be so precise. It's crazy. I think Woods said he was about a yard off all week. And now he says that, half the time he doesn't win. But the truth is he didn't play as aggressively as you need to, and 17 and 18 are a fairly good example. Those are really not defensive holes. You know what I mean? In other words, they're not easy pars anymore, and they're definitely not birdie holes. And so then you go from them being tougher holes to the last round of a tournament, and you're looking at a pretty volatile mix.
You mentioned Tiger. Do you think there's still an element there? I saw a little bit of it. You got a world-class athlete coming back from a world-class injury. Do you still think there's a little bit of hesitancy to go the 110% on that leg that he usually did before he got hurt?
No, only because I wrote it really on Thursday. I walked around with him, and on number 2, which is a big downhill par 5. I mean, if you don't, they put a bunker. I mean, that's a hole that shows you how good golf architects can be, because everybody was killing that thing as it was a guaranteed birdie for almost anybody, especially long hitters. So they moved the fairway bunker, down the fairway and brought it a little bit more into play on the right side, so that it's a really, really tough driving hole if you want to go try and hit it down there in 2. Anyway, Woods missed his drive off to the right. It left the fairway by 25, 30 yards, wound up in a little gully, so he had to pitch back, leaving him with an iron, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 iron. He must have been 230 anyway, going downhill. So the point is, he had to basically, that left knee was the brace for the whole swing, and he was going to take a full swing at it, as opposed to a driver where you're pretty much level.
Mm-hmm.
So you could clearly tell. In fact, I talked to Hank Haney about that very shot, because he said he watched it with some great interest too. But you could see, his left leg was clearly the downhill leg, and he had to brace the whole shot for a full shot in that thing. Hit the ball nice and high. Got plenty of, everything from the swing, the trajectory. Pretty much told you he wasn't afraid to take a full swing on that leg. So I think the leg is fine. What I think is a little rusty is that sort of competitive nature. I don't think, not that he wasn't trying, I don't think he realized that the course was largely set up. The pins and tees were favorable for attacking the course. I mean, you look at Anthony Kim made a record number of birdies on Friday, I think 11, and Chad Campbell went out on Thursday, birdied his first 5 holes, never been done there. Stevie Williams, Tiger's caddy, said at the end of Friday, we've been playing the ladies' tees for 2 days.
But they don't really have a set of ladies' tees there, do they?
Well, they're forward tees, but the point is, if you remember, I'd say about, I'm trying to remember, because I think it was 5 or 6 were clearly up the par. The number 4, which is could be a killer par 3, was way up at the tips. 7, they gave him a pretty good run off of the green. Off of the tee. There were a couple on the back. 13 and 15 were both up. They were looking for some red numbers after all the complaining that's going on the last few years.
Sure.
So the course toughening.
Right, and they knew that's what everybody was going to be looking for.
Sure, and they put some flags in some good spots, and they couldn't do anything about the weather. Believe me, even as mysterious as those guys are alleged to be, we just got 4 days of great weather. The one storm we were supposed to get Friday afternoon didn't show up till late Friday night, so they really lost. You had good, calm conditions. It was a little breezy once or twice in the morning, but you couldn't ask for more optimal conditions to play.
Our guest this morning is Jim Litke, national columnist for the Associated Press, who lives right here in Chicago. You go to a place like the Masters, Jim, and you don't really go to the regular tour events. You kind of hit all the high points, no matter what sport it is. Did you notice anything, though, from all the times you've been down to Augusta? Did you notice anything that changed because of the current state of the economy?
Yeah, it's funny because, we're really on the lookout for that stuff everywhere we go now, because we're ending up writing about it more and more. The funny thing was I was leaving the airport, because normally I fly into Columbia, South Carolina, which is about an hour away. And this time I flew directly into Augusta, and once I got over the initial shock of the guy telling me the flagpole coming out of the airport is $65. I mean, I got a 10-minute cab ride from the airport to where I was staying downtown, and the cabbie just, he didn't turn the flag on. I go, what's up with that? And he goes, well, it's, $65. So I thought, all right, that's, probably what goes on all the time. And then as we're leaving, he points to there's like an auxiliary landing strip where they keep the corporate jets. And he goes, normally by now there's at least 3 rows of these things, and there were maybe at the time a handful, 5, 6. There was barely one full row of this thing. So we heard on the corporate end a lot of the high rentals that would go for, say, $25,000 for the week, where, a company bring down anywhere from 5 to 15 either employees or guests was down. But, the waiting list, they stopped even taking a waiting list about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't think there's, you couldn't get a ticket for this event. Back then, you still can't get one. It's no easier now, but it'll be interesting to see if another year or two this holds out, whether it'll soften that market.
Well, I read somewhere, and I can't remember because I read so much, and some of it interests me because I wonder if they were at the same tournament like that you were at. But some of these guys, there are at least 2 guys wrote that the crowds were down, and it looks like all the tickets weren't used, which to me sounds ridiculous.
Just anecdotally, I'd say I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't even admit that place was so jammed up on Sunday morning when Phil and Tiger went off together, you could barely breathe. I mean, once or twice, if you didn't want to expend any energy, you could get in the middle of the gallery and get carried along. I mean, they were 5 deep everywhere on the fairway, and around the greens, they were 10 and 12 deep. I mean, we counted them a couple times because, the legendary story is in 80 when Palmer was just turned 50. He was, I think, 15 off the lead, and Nicklaus was 16 off the lead going into Sunday. Semi Ballesteros ended up winning the tournament that year. But anyway, unlike Tiger and Phil, those 2 were at the same number. One was, I remember 9 or 10 over, and the other was, again, they were combined 31 strokes off the lead. They got paired together mysteriously somehow on Sunday, and supposedly, there's a great quote from Bobby Jones's grandson, who ended up, walking along with the match, just talking about it didn't look like there was anybody else on the golf course. Yeah, I mean, it was they had drawn so much of the gallery, just like Tiger and Phil did in the morning. We kept joking that, Kenny Perry's kids were probably in the middle of the Tiger-Phil gallery, sending him a text message saying, hey, Dad, if you're doing well, tweet us or something. So it's crazy.
Hey, Jim, take a break for a second. We're going to get some commercials run here. This is The Score. This is the Chicagoland Golf. My guest this morning is an old friend, the national columnist for the Associated Press, Jim Litke. This is the Chicagoland Golf Show. As I said, this is The Score. It's Sports Radio 670, and it's CBS Radio Chicago. Kind of rehashing the Masters this morning. That's what's on the breakfast menu, rehash. Jim Litke, the national columnist for the Associated Press and a Chicago resident. It's got to be difficult, Jim, when you do all this writing and a lot of people in other towns think you're one of the staff columnists, and a lot of your stuff doesn't even run here in Chicago.
Yeah, because the biggest papers usually need the least amount of columns because they've got their own guys, and the ones that aren't going under or in danger of doing that basically can afford the travel budget. So usually, I mean, most of my career I ended up working before the Internet, for instance, on, papers from, say, 100,000 circulation and down. But now it's a little bit nicer because at least pretty much all the websites will run my columns, so it's a little bit easier to find.
Well, I try to run as many of your columns. Of course, we use your stuff around the time of the Masters. That there certainly are exceptions to that. And the reason I do it is so that when you walk into a golf course around here, maybe somebody will recognize you and invite you to play.
That's actually worked out pretty well. That's not a bad source at all, by the way.
Well, thank you. Okay, I got a couple topics. Angel Cabrera. We have seen, like Birdie Kim, that there's, and the ACLU, they could do whatever they want. But, there's a language problem on the LPGA Tour. It's not going to get any better as long as these Asian players are coming over here to play, which is their right. I don't have a problem with that. But because the LPGA Tour doesn't provide interpreters, translators, it's so hard to sit down for a writer who might even get an assignment to sit down with Birdie Kim and do an interview. Now, when Angel Cabrera won the U.S. Open 2 years ago, I said to my wife, he will not get 1/3, if that, of the endorsements and contracts that a normal U.S. Open winner gets. Is that going to happen with the Masters? And what needs to be done to change that? Because I read the quotes every night from his interviews, and I can't believe all he did was give one-sentence answers.
Yeah, that's a problem. Anytime you're basically if you're going to win a major U.S. event and you don't speak English, your endorsement opportunities are just pretty much washed down the drain here. Whether they'll do much better in Argentina, I don't think so, because frankly there it's kind of it's maybe at the same level lacrosse is over here. I'm not even sure it's that big, to be honest with you. In fact, a very good friend of mine is a guy named David McIntosh, who's worked for the Buenos Aires Herald for probably 30-some-odd years, and every maybe 3 or 4 years he'd bring 2 Argentine journalists with him, because either they wanted to see the course or there was somebody else playing, and it was 9 times out of 10 it was Cabrera, quite frankly, in the last 2 decades. So it's not a big game over there. What I thought was kind of neat about this story, and it's a shame because really it was glossed over, and largely because of the language thing, is most golfers are familiar with the Roberto Di Vincenzo story, where the guy effectively shoots the low round on Sunday he should have won the Masters, ends up that his playing partner, Bob Goldie, writes a 4 down at 17 where Di Vincenzo actually makes a 3. He signs an incorrect scorecard and ends up being disqualified. So 41 years later, that green jacket that should have gone down there now goes down there with Cabrera. The problem is Cabrera knows Steve Vincenzo, has met him a couple of times, mentioned him very briefly, I think, on Sunday in response to a question, and that whole story went, sort of retold, and it's really a sweet tale. In fact, I think Colby, if I'm not mistaken, who ends up winning that tournament, got so much hate mail that just before he passed away, got to be 10 years ago now, he took out the shoebox and just to show guys. I mean, it was loaded with, you should do this, you should do that, because he basically lucked into the Masters jacket.
Mm-hmm.
So, Cabrera has, and he's a really appealing guy. I don't know if you remember when he won the U.S. Open last year. My favorite quote was, he goes, some guys have trainers, some guys have sports psychologists. I just smoke cigarettes.
Well, you got to love it.
Yeah, he got so much grief for that he since quit smoking.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it didn't affect his play. I think it would affect John Daly's play.
Another sad story, and I got to be honest with you. We were like flipping coins to see who was going to go out on Washington Road to watch him sell body parts during the week. Luckily, I didn't draw the short straw on that one, and it didn't end up having to write Cabrera, because it's the same thing. You're not going to have a lot of quotes to work with, and normally the little bits that you can collect, like a guy comes off 18 and you can steal a minute or two with a lot of guys. But with Cabrera, because they were bringing him, obviously, in the interview room, and you couldn't even get any side questions in, so.
Yeah, it's difficult. All right, now, the next topic, the playoff. Boy, I have advocated for that for years, and for exactly what I consider the reasons we watched last Sunday. To have something as important as a Masters championship after you play 72 grueling holes under all that pressure, to maybe have it come down to a silly bounce off the green or something that happens, those guys, you talk about the pucker factor, those guys on 18, you could just see it all over their face, which is what makes it interesting. But I think we need to give these guys a little more fair shot and either do a 3-hole or a 4-hole aggregate playoff. Your thoughts?
You know, I'm always split on that question, to be honest with you. I kind of like the idea of finishing it right then and there, even though you're right, probably 9 times out of 10 guys are either so nervous, so fatigued, so, you know, whatever, that they're not going to play their best golf in the playoff. You're just, that's asking too much. The flip side is you know, it loses some real momentum when you have to come back on Monday. There's just no...
No, I'm not talking about Monday. I'm talking about what they do at the Open Championship. When it's over, if there's a tie, they play 4 holes right now.
Yeah.
Instead of a sudden death, it's 4 holes total score.
And I've seen 2 of those in you know, the one with Garcia and Padraig Harrington was good, and at least had, you know, plenty of good shots. But you know, in those 4 holes, there were quite a few fumbles by Sergio. You know, it's I don't know. I can see the merit to both of them. This was about, you know, to me, the one that really smelled was a couple of years ago in the U.S. Open when Tiger wasn't there and 3 guys missed from inside, you know, 4 feet. Maybe even been in regulation, come to think of it. Kosin, I think who else was in.
Oh, sure, that was Southern Hills.
That was the worst couple, you know, that was maybe in a 5-minute window, worst golf shots you've ever seen in your life. And there were like 4 or 5 of them. Kosin missed from 2 feet. Who else missed? Not Furyk. It was
Stuart Sink.
Yeah, exactly right. And who was the third guy in this?
Mark Brooks.
Right, and they came back on Monday, and I got to tell you, nobody cared. I don't think their family came back Monday to see him play. You know what I mean? So, yeah. There's clearly, and the 18-hole playoff, I think that was only maybe my 3rd, 4th year in golf when Oakmont went to a playoff in '93. You know, with Colin Montgomery, who only had black clothing left. It's 104 degrees, and this guy's walking around like, you know, like a popsicle. It was so. Yeah, I mean, there's a different ways to mix it up. Sudden death to me is not bad. I like the 4 hole, depending. You know, it largely depends on who's playing. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of guys I'd like to see play 4 holes head to head. There's some times when, you know what, can't end fast enough.
So then what they ought to do is they ought to have like an official playoff declaration come from you know, like an official score, and they go, Jim, do you like these players? Should we go sudden death or should we go 4 holes? No, just kidding.
Well, let me say this. You know, if they walked into the press room at Augusta and said, show of hands, how many guys want to see this thing go on? It'd be interesting to see, you know, which golfers would get the nod and which ones would be sent to sudden death.
Yeah. Our guest on this portion of the show, I keep trying to introduce you as Jim Lipke, Chicago resident, but more importantly, he covers all the major, huge, big events for the Associated Press. He's their national columnist. Well, what about, okay, the guys at the Augusta National, they pretty much do what they want over there. Are you in favor of them, at least as a trial one year, coming in and saying, you know what, we're all going to use the same ball. Here it is. Take some balls out of the barrel, put them in your bag, and let's go. Would you like to see that?
Yes, without doubt. Without a doubt. And I'll, without revealing any names, I was walking around, on Thursday with their golf writer, Doug Ferguson, who's just all-time guy, but is also, you know, still doing enough, is tied enough to the industry where he knows all the players. They know him. They're always kind of, you know, planting ideas. They all want to make, he's got a notes column. He does he does a little bit on equipment here and there. And a guy from Titleist, we won't say who, came up, I think, on the 3rd or 4th hole when Vijay Singh started out pretty poorly and started mocking that commercial. You know, Singh, I guess, says in his new, I think he switched to Srixon. I can't remember which ball he used.
Srixon.
Yeah, but he starts talking about, you know, it made me number 2, or I was able to go all the way. And he's doing, you know, an imitation of Vijay's voice, sort of mocking him because apparently that Titleist, you know, Pro V1 had a lot to do, or at least from Titleist's viewpoint, had a lot to do with his success and with his recent loss of form, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's a good point. I mean, there is a lot to do. A lot would change if everyone was playing the same ball. I think there's, you know, Mickelson's probably, got that golf ball as tailored, because Callaway is putting forth a huge effort to make sure their handful of top stars are as happy as they were over at Titleist or wherever they were playing previously. So some guys are clearly getting a benefit. Now, all pros obviously benefit from the newer balls, the better spin rates. You know, they're a little bit hotter off the tee. I mean, there's lots of ways that it's helping those guys that we're not getting the benefit of. But I'd be curious to see which guys are getting, you know, a little extra from either the manufacturer, or if they lucked into just a perfect golf ball for their equipment, or because the stuff is so good now, guys are able to match, you know, irons and balls, drivers and balls so much more than they ever could before.
I'll tell you one of my favorite stories about the Masters. I don't know, I haven't talked to him yet, but I'm sure that he has his streak intact because he's been doing this for years. He is a patron. I'm not going to say his name because he's in the business and his name would be instantly recognized here in Chicago. But his little amusement, not that there's not enough going on at Augusta National during the Masters to keep one amused, but what he does is he goes in there with a pocket full of tees. And he gets out of the tee box. You know how there's like thousands of people crowded around. And, of course, they're all watching the guy take the club back, and then they're watching the flight of the ball. Well, what he does is he'd get with a group like with Tiger Woods or in the old days with Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus. And on every tee box, he'd get into that crowd, and then he would flick a tee up into the air so it would come down and hit somebody. And it was interesting because he would tell stories about how these people would push and shove each other trying to get Arnie's tee.
Oh, yeah, and that was probably pre-eBay when you couldn't sell the damn thing.
Yeah, that's just his sense of humor, and I appreciate that, you know.
I kind of like that. And, you know, the next trick is to start throwing pieces of used chewing gum around. You know, see fight over that stuff.
A do-rag. Hey, Jim, thank you. Yeah, we're out of time. I'll tell you, this time went fast, but thank you very much. Your opinions are always welcome on this show, solicited and appreciated.
Thanks very much. Now, let's see if we can't, next time we'll do this from England where I got a 7-hour head start and I'm a little bit more awake.
When is the next major? I guess next month, the Players?
I don't know. Not sure.
I think Roosevelt wants it to be a major.
Well, you know, it's got pretty much everything you need. It's got a full field. It's got a really good and familiar golf course, which is really, really nice for viewers. And you can pack that place as full as you want. It's a good golf course. It's got a little bit variable length, so you can play it longer or shorter. It's got most of what you need for a major, just missing a tradition of about 130 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, it just proves that the size of the purse don't make it a major.
Yeah.
Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure, Phil. Thanks.
Okay, bud. That's Jim Litke from the Associated Press. I try to run his golf columns as often as we can in Chicagoland Golf. But here's a guy that lives in Chicago, and, I mean, he goes to the Olympics, he goes to the Super Bowl, he goes to the Final Four, and he writes columns off of all the major, huge, big sporting events in the world. And a lot of the stuff he writes, you don't get to read it here in Chicago, at least in the papers, because a lot of the papers don't run his stuff. They have their own columnists. On the other hand, you go on the Internet and do a search for Jim Litke, Litke, and read his stuff all the time. Jim's a hell of a writer and an old friend. It's 6:46. Let's make it 6:47 in Chicago. If you've got a tee time this morning, looks like we're going to have a beautiful day. It's going to be 70 degrees outside. We'll come back with more. This is the Chicagoland Golf Show. I'm Phil Kosin. This is the Score, Sports Radio 670, CBS Radio, Chicago. 6:51 in Chicago, 51 minutes after 6 o'clock. The Chicagoland Golf Show. I'll tell you what, NASCAR Dave, that Jim Litke is always a special guest. We have a good group. You know, we have like Bob Verdi. I mean, we have some really good guests, but the ones that I always get the most mail and feedback on are like Litke, Gary Van Sickle, Bob Verdi, Brian Hewitt, you know, that crowd.
Yeah, a bunch of guys I'd love to hang out with, in other words, and go to all the places that they get to go to.
I was kind of shocked. I got some emails from people, and I know this is going to be a surprise to you and the audience. I don't really watch the Golf Channel that much, okay? I know that's a surprise. I know some people, I've been over to their house, and I don't know if they did it just because I was visiting or if that's how it is, but, you know, there was a TV in one of the rooms that was on turned to the Golf Channel, the Golf Infomercial Channel. But I got some emails from people early in the week, and everybody's saying, like, wow, it's a major, and I'm watching some of the Golf Channel coverage from Augusta and everything. Where's Brian Hewitt? And I thought about it. And so I had seen on the Golf Writers Association of America website that the Golf Channel was looking for a website editor, work goofy hours, you know, low pay, the whole thing, because the Golf Channel, you know, they're cheap. You could tell by some of the help that they have that they don't pay very much. But Hewitt wasn't on, so I sent him a quick email, and apparently, you know, sign of the times maybe, and this has happened to a lot of guys. Apparently Brian was let go. I don't know why. And he told me, because I asked him, I said, you know, in the email, maybe we can get together and, you know, you can join us for one of our shows in the near future. And he said he's contractually obligated not to do any stories for anyone else or any radio appearances. He can't do it until January 1st of next year. So Brian Hewitt gone from the Golf Channel, and, you know, he's a Chicago guy. I've known Brian. Actually, we met each other. We didn't know it, but we met each other when we were in high school. He was at New Trier, and I was at a school in the western suburbs that had William Ayers speak there, so I've disowned my high school. Yeah, I mean, I knew Hewitt. He wrote for us. He wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times. I remember when he got the golf beat, you know, after he followed Barry Cronin. And then Hewitt went from that to Golf Week, where they still allowed him to write for us. And then he went to the Golf Channel, where they wanted exclusivity. And now he's like a lot of really good writers from major newspapers in this country that are either shutting down or cutting down. Brian's going to be looking for something to do. And it's really a shame because it's the talent pool out there for golf writers is absolutely terrific. So, you know, we wish him well, and I'm going to try to give him a call and talk to him at length. A couple things I just wanted to mention. Marv Rezabek, former pro, he retired a few years ago. He had been at Bonnybrook for a million years. And Marv and I went to the same high school, not together. He was there before me, but we did attend the same high school. And that would be one in the western suburbs where they had William Ayers speak, which I have disowned. Did I say that already? Anyway, Marv's going to be teaching part-time. He just can't sit still in his retirement. So he'll be teaching part-time at Cog Hill this summer, and he'll be doing some of the group lessons too. So, you know, another great teacher down there. We're going to talk to one of the best after the top of the hour, Kevin Weeks, who's one of the best putting teachers in the country. In the next few weeks, we'll have Dr. Jim Suddy on. Jim's one of the top teaching professionals, too, and both Kevin and Jim work with a lot of tour players. And so it'll be fun to have them on. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was that contrary to what you read in Chicagoland Golf, and we were misled by an ad, it doesn't matter. But anyway, Klein Creek is not exclusively private this year. It is still open to the public, but they are selling memberships, and it's part of a trio of courses, Royal Hawk and Royal Fox, both of which are private courses. But we saw an ad that was kind of misleading, and it didn't say anything about it staying open to the public. We had heard that it was going to be a private course. There is a new owner, John Weiss. I had a nice conversation with him this week. And so he just asked me if I would let the listeners know and let our readers know that Klein Creek is open to the public this year. And they plan on I'm keeping it that way. So we'll take another break, and then after the top of the hour, we'll come back and talk to Cog Hill teaching pro Kevin Weeks. If you have a question about your putting, who doesn't? Yip. 312-644-6767. We'll do that a little bit later in the interview, though. But you can get yourself queued up, 312-644-6767, if you have a question for Kevin Weeks. This is Phil Kosin. This is the Chicagoland Golf Show. This is The Score, Sports Radio 670. This is CBS.